All right, we will call the Planning Commission on June 10th, 2025 to order. First thing we have a few members that are joining us on Zoom. Right now we have our township solicitor joining us by Zoom, that's Mark Fisher. And then Rich Sarkari is also joining us. And then back to join us is our township planner, Nathan Jones. So Nate, I'm going to turn things over to you and you can start us off. Oh, actually, before,
Sure.
let me actually, do you want me to go through the approval of the minutes or do you want to start with anything first?
Go through.
Okay. First, we have the approval of the May 13th, 2025 minutes. Does anyone want to make a motion to approve those minutes?
We'll make a motion to approve the May minutes.
Great. Is there a second?
Second that.
All right, we have a motion that's been properly seconded. Discussion. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, say no. Motion carries. All right, Nate. Now I'll turn it over to you with our first agenda item, 1500 Trexlertown Road, Western Lehigh Services.
Yes, sir. Thank you very much. So as I'm sure everyone is well aware, this applicant has been before the Planning Commission multiple times in the past with respect to conditional use approval, as well as now land development approval. To give a little bit of history, just for those who are not fully up to speed, who may be watching at home, there was a conditional use approval that was recommended by the Planning Commission and then granted by the Board of Commissioners. Following that, there was an appeal made on some of the conditions that were imposed by the Board of Commissioners. This did go to Lehigh County Court, after which time there was an order, and that order is being used now as the design parameters for the land development plan that you see before you this evening. The parcel in question is in the C Commercial District, and the proposal includes the office headquarters for the landscaping company, Western Lehigh Services, as well as their garage, their tool storage, their salt shed, and other accessory uses on site. I should note, if you were to look at the plan does show that there are still buffers included along the mobile home community to the east, to the northeast, as well as a long frontage along Trexlertown Road to shield view from the garage. There are trails on the frontage as well. There has been significant discussion on the staff level with respect to design regarding both traffic, on-site improvements, which the most recent modification now shows the movement of parking, and other couple of items that were addressed by the Planning Commission at the last submission. And at this point in time, there is a LOMR that is being contemplated, that has been submitted for review, that is currently being reviewed by the township engineer, and submitted on behalf of the applicant, that would go to FEMA, that would modify several lots adjoining the property. Again, this does have a conditional use approval at this time. This project has been before the township now for over 2 years, I believe. And we are looking at the staff level, having consideration to, if the board were to take any recommending action tonight, several recommendations included following staff review of this land development. With that, if you have any questions for me, I'm happy to answer them. Otherwise, I would hand it over to Mr. McAdam to speak on the more technical items regarding the review of this most recent land development submission.
And Nate, if I can just interrupt, the applicants, if you'd like to come up and sit as well, because I'm sure there'll be some, as the engineer gets into some of the items, there'll be some questions that come up.
And Mr. Chairman, if I could, just make sure for the solicitor and Mr. Jones that you speak into the mic, and for the public as well at home. Thank you.
All you, Brian.
Thank you. We had done a review dated June 5th, 2025. It is largely, some minor engineering and drafting issues that need to be addressed, none of which would dramatically change what's shown on the current plan. We would have no real objections to the Planning Commission making a recommendation for approval tonight. I think the only thing that I wanted to highlight and perhaps get feedback from the Planning Commission itself is one of the items that the applicant's engineer had complied with was in regard to the zoning officer's review about shifting the parking away from the front of the garage, as had previously been shown. What we noticed was that that has in fact been done. The striping for the parking spaces has been moved. However, the paving that was there for those previously shown spaces, the paving remains. I don't really have a major issue with it. I know it's been accounted for with the stormwater management design. But our concern was if parking officially isn't going to be there, maybe it opens it up to other things being there that may in fact kind of create the same issues as to why the township wouldn't want parking along the street like that. So not a problem for me particularly. I just wanted to make just a comment and suggest that if the planning commission had an opinion on it, maybe we have them take that paving out or not. Either
Sure.
way, I don't mind. Otherwise, things are, like I said, there's some engineering and drafting issues. We've been coordinating back and forth with the applicant's engineer. I'm not aware of anything that can't be addressed. We had talked specifically about a couple of things that we would address between now and the board meeting. I will note that there are 3 waivers requested, one of which is for the submission to be considered preliminary final. Certainly no objection to that. The other is a waiver for the requirement to provide curbing along Trexlertown Road. Curbing is required, but this is a PennDOT road, and as the Planning Commission is aware, ultimately PennDOT determines whether or not they will allow curbing. We've had other recent projects where they said they will not allow curbing. So my recommendation is that we're okay with what's shown. It is subject to PennDOT, and we're assuming that PennDOT is going to say we don't want curbing either, in which case it might be wise to just defer curbing for the frontage. The other waiver request is to allow widening on Trexlertown Road to be widened to a half width of 17 feet. The ordinance requires 19. We feel that relative to the general impact of the project, 17 feet will be acceptable. It shouldn't be a problem. Similar to the curbing, if PennDOT feels that something else is necessary, they will certainly require that. We're comfortable with what's proposed currently. Those are the 3 waiver requests. And that's really about it from my end. Like I said, we're working through some of the engineering and drafting details, but otherwise, things that we had been talking about before have been addressed on the current plan.
All right. So as we bring up those plans, so everyone can see the parking that was mentioned in the first part of that explanation, can the applicant just explain the change and what the intended use?
Sure. So this was requested by the zoning officer. We originally had parking striped just to the east side or plan south of the truck garage. And we were able to relocate it to the rear of the office. And parking layout on the other portions of the site remains similar. We would like to keep this impervious area in front of the truck garage, understanding we will not park vehicles there, but it will make maneuverability in and out of that truck garage simpler. We have garage doors facing Trexlertown all along that frontage, and it would be easier to maneuver trucks in and out of the facility if the impervious was kept in place. We'd prefer to keep it.
So your thought is it will be striped, but not used as parking?
Would not be striped.
striped.
It would not be striped.
Would not be striped. It would not be used as parking. Yes. Would we be able to go to, I believe this is sheet 12, the landscape plan? This can show that this impervious area that will not be used as parking will nonetheless be buffered from view from Trexlertown.
And I would agree. There is a significant amount of landscaping along the frontage. So certainly that will be there. It will provide screening. Just, it's unusual for somebody to have more paving than they really need.
Yeah.
But you make a good point. It does help with maneuverability. So like I said, whether it stays or goes, I'm fine with it.
Okay.
And it does make sense that it would provide a little bit easier maneuverability for larger vehicles. So
Got it.
practically speaking, it makes sense.
And you bring up a good point. Typically, you wouldn't have more impervious than you would need, but
Right.
in this case, it would help with maneuverability.
Got it. Thank you. Any mem-
That plane's coming.
Okay, yeah, no, I know it is moving really slow here too. So as that's coming up, do any other members of the Planning Commission have any questions, concerns, basically highlighting some of the things that Brian just talked about?
My initial concern, probably a year ago, was the buffer between the residential park next to you, but I think you've shown that there's a pretty substantial landscape buffer between that. And I assume that all the larger trucks that will be operating during snowstorms would be to the plan west of the site. Is that correct?
Yeah, I can speak to the buffer. We're using Class B buffer with Class C buffer planting size, so a little bit larger plantings than usual. We've coordinated, or our landscape architect coordinated with Kim Flanders to determine the final location of that buffer. And then I'll ask representative here from Western Lehigh about the specific operations.
Just pull the microphone closer to you, just so that everyone on.
Yeah, that would be correct. We had the salt bin was originally out front there, but we've now moved it in the back for better operating procedures during those storms.
Thank you.
Great. Any other questions? Any comments from the public? Mike, if you want to come on up to the podium, introduce yourself.
Mike Siegel, 1939 Astor Road, Macungie. Several questions. I was here back in, I think November or December when the project was still in litigation. Can you please tell me what those 12 conditions are now that have been adjudicated?
Township Solicitor Mark, do you want to address any of that question?
Mike, I can't read them off to you. It's a complicated court opinion, but essentially what happened was the court took certain conditions from the board's decision and said you have to use the language from the Planning Commission's recommendation. And then there were a few others that were stricken. A few others were just waived agreeably. And that leaves us with what's left. So it's a mixture of the board's decision, the Planning Commission's decision, and a couple that the court just threw out.
Thank you.
Sure.
The second thing I wanted to ask is, where are the stormwater basins on this plan?
There are two underground stormwater facilities on this plan. There's one on the northern portion of the property. You can see the outline just faintly on this plan. If you go to, I believe it is sheet 16 is the PCSM plan. It might show it a little better.
Basically, the rear and the side of the garage
So
have large underground storage systems.
these areas here that I'm going over.
Yes, yes, yep. So there's one to the south and to the west of the truck garage, and then there's other just to the west of the office.
And where do they're going to discharge into the floodplain?
So both of them, there's a collection pipe that passes through the site, goes from Trexler Town Road, and it'll collect the discharge from both the underground basins and discharge it into Spring Creek. There's that small gap on those two trees. You can see there's the outfall on that location.
Now we'll take all the runoff along Trexler Town Road as well.
Yeah, that's intended to manage the
Thank
runoff
you.
from Trexler Town Road as well.
It's sorely needed because the area that you show that where that arrow is right now, it's been underwater and gone over Trexler Town Road in the past. That's how much water it gets there. Back, they actually had to close down the road just below where your earth disturbance ends. They've had to block it off. So, the last thing I have is you're proposing a force main low pressure system. Is that in the anticipation that someday the mobile home park may have to connect?
This tie-in with the low pressure force main is sized only for this facility, but we are intending to provide a sanitary sewer easement along the southern property line. So in the future, if they need to access this interceptor, if mobile home park needs to access this interceptor, they can run along Trexler Town Road and then access through that easement.
Thank you, because they've had past history of sewage overflows there, so that would make sense.
Yeah, and Mike, there will be a note on the record plan that the plan currently shows a 30-foot easement on the southern, parallel to the southern property line, as well as a note that says that the applicant will cooperate and coordinate with.
That's great. That's great. that you
As,
pointed that out.
as that need arises in the future.
That's all I say. It looks a lot better than the first time I saw this plan. So with the landscaping out there and the only other question I had on here is the deceleration lane. Are you having one come on this PennDOT making you put one in? Because I'm concerned about trucks and vehicles coming down Trexlertown Road, even though they say they're not supposed to come down there. And if you don't have a deceleration lane, your vehicles, landscaping vehicles, as they're turning in, maybe he rear-ended there.
We are in coordination with PennDOT at this time. We do need a highway occupancy permit. So we've gone through a few cycles. We have expanded the openings of each of the driveways to more easily accommodate truck traffic. But this time they're not requesting that we install deceleration.
They need to take a little trip down there in the evening and in the morning to watch illegal trucks coming down there. I'm just worried about your employees here because as they're turning right in there, especially for snow plowing operations that you do for, I'm assuming, private contracting and maybe other municipalities, that may be a hindrance for you. Otherwise, it looks nice. Thank you.
Any other comments from the public? All right, so we do have a proposed conditional or recommendation. Is anyone interested in making that motion?
I'll make a motion to recommend conditional approval of the Western Lehigh Services prelim final land development applications with conditions 1 through 10 and waivers 1 through 3.
Great. And the applicant has seen this document? They have not. Okay. Do we have? We'll give them a moment to review.
Because
yeah.
we went over the review.
I was gonna say, a lot of this has been gone over before, but as they're reviewing that, just a note for anyone in attendance or watching on Zoom, as far as the agenda goes, item 4.4, the 1470 Brookside Road subdivision, the applicant has requested that to be tabled, so we will not be reviewing that tonight.
Yeah. They need. Okay. Good to us.
Okay, excellent. So as mentioned, we have a properly second motion. The applicant has reviewed the document that that motion pertains to. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say no. Abstentions, hearing none. Motion passes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You read the motion? Do we not have a second? I apologize. Well, we'll do that again for official. I thought we did have a second on that. So we did have a second? No.
I just said.
Okay. Well, we have it. My apologies. We have a properly seconded motion. We've already heard the ayes. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
4 ayes. There we go. Same result.
Thank you.
Sorry about that.
That's why Kim's.
Yes, exactly. Exactly. Save me. All right. Our second item is 617 North Crocs Road. If those applicants could come to the table. Nate, I'll turn it back over to you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This is also another very familiar project to the Planning Commission and members of the public, I'm sure. The 617 North Crocs mixed use, bounded by the 222 bypass immediately to the south, and North Crocs to the west across the bypass from Hamilton Crossings. This is a project that gained conditional use approval some time ago. It consists of 318 apartments as part of an apartment complex that will include pool, a dog run, a very generous and large trail system throughout the site, sporting courts, and several other on-site amenities that will be able to be used by the residents. I should also note, again, we have a 160-room hotel there. This is part of a mixed use, and we do have different components. The 160-room hotel is a dual brand hotel with short-term and semi-long-term stays. And then last but not least, just under 20,000 square foot commercial, retail, potentially food service building that will both serve visitors to the area and the neighborhood, but also specifically residents of the community and hopefully patrons of the hotel. We don't have any specific users for that space yet. From the last review, it should be noted that there were some comments that were previously made with respect to the PP&L easement, and it does appear that the applicant has worked successfully with PP&L to be able to put certain infrastructure and plantings within that easement of the high tension lines. The layout of the site, the trails, and stormwater management largely remains the same, as well as the very generous landscaping that's proposed throughout the site along the loop road, which will actually form eventually a colonnade of trees similar to what we have on Hamilton Boulevard, as well as a very large and prominent buffer protecting the residents from the bypass just to the south from the several apartment buildings that are located there. I should note we're continuing to work towards the basic planning designs on this remaining as wonderful as they have been, but also through the functionality of the initial design. We have worked with them, and I will defer to the township engineer to ensure that original stormwater matters regarding the township's easement that runs through the property and the basin that must be maintained are in good shape, as well as the downstream situation on Shantz Road, which I'm sure, as we've discussed previously, is handled. Other planning items of note, we want to make sure that addressing at this site is handled adequately through the county emergency services and the fire department to make sure that first responders and life safety personnel are able to access the site. This is very similar to and led to the inclusion of the emergency access that will go through onto the Pennsylvania Turnpike property to ensure that there's emergency access to the site. And then I would again defer to the township engineer to note this point, but we have two infrastructure related continued discussions that are occurring. One with our good neighbors in Upper Macungie Township, where we are working to ensure that a traffic light is installed at that site. This was part of and originally contemplated as part of this being Hamilton Crossings North at one point in time. That is under discussion, remains under discussion to ensure that that light goes in. And also PennDOT comments that have been received regarding the southerly entrance and exit of the loop road closest to the bypass, which now have a different configuration as originally proposed, which would require a right in and right out. Again, I'd note as far as planning related topics go, not much has changed since the original conditional use submission or the previous land development submissions. They do remain to have the connectivity and walkability that we look for, as well as the excellence in landscaping. A new project design companion was submitted. That continues to be on par with what was originally approved. So at this point in time, we are looking primarily and only at technical matters that revolve around technical design. And with that, I would hand it off to Mr. McAdam to discuss those items so we can have a little bit more discussion if necessary on them.
Thanks, Nate. I think Nate summarized things pretty well. As far as the site itself, as Nate mentioned, We've been in coordination with the applicant and their respective consultants regarding the improvements to North Crocs Road. That's an ongoing process because it involves PennDOT. There's been, I'll say, varied success. Trying to think of a better way to put it, but it is moving forward. And one of the changes that was made in response to PennDOT concerns was that the southerly driveway that was previously proposed to be right in, right out, PennDOT wasn't crazy about that. And the current proposal is that will be a right out only. The northern access will continue to be a full service driveway with the traffic signal. That is all still part of the plan. And then as Nate mentioned, there's some technical things. I just was skimming through my letter, and it's a relatively long letter, but I think it's worth noting that quite a bit of it is informative, really, relative to conditional use conditions, just as reminders. I don't want people thinking like, oh my God, you got a 10-page letter. This is crazy. A lot of it is informative. There are not that many issues with the internal part of the site that need to be addressed. Certainly nothing that's going to change layout or really certainly number of units, the size of the hotel. Anything of major importance will not be changing. I've had ongoing conversations with Mr. Keenan about the internal design and concerns that we've had. And my feeling at this point, I don't want to misspeak, but I feel like everything in my review will comply, in that regard, which is always nice. I will say too, for the Planning Commission, there are a series of waivers being requested. There are 6 that are being requested. Some of them are kind of becoming the usual suspects with many of these land developments. The first of which is the request to consider the plan as preliminary final. Certainly have no objection to that. The next waiver request is in regard to separation of accesses onto an arterial street. We don't have an issue with this one, in large part because relative to the site constraints, there are limitations that are really kind of beyond the applicant's control. And we are comfortable at this point that what's proposed will provide safe access. So we're in favor of that waiver being granted. The next is regarding detention basin side slopes. We don't have a problem with that. The requirement for privately owned basins, which these will be, is a maximum slope of 4.5 to 1, 4.5 horizontal. Good Lord, 4.5 horizontal to 1 vertical. The basin side slopes range from like roughly 3.5 to 1 to 4.5 to 1. We have no objection to that. Next is regarding street tree placement. Basically, because of the PP&L right-of-way, there are going to have to be some shifts that will compromise a standard every 50 feet. We have no objection to that. I'm sure Mr. Keenan and his staff will continue to coordinate with us in terms of getting an appropriate layout that might include some groupings or less than 50 feet in some places, whatever. We have no objection to that. The next waiver request is in regard to the recreation land to be provided. Applicant is requesting a fee in lieu. We certainly don't have an objection to that. That certainly would be up to the Board of Commissioners, but it is a waiver request that's currently being requested. And the next is regarding storm sewer pipe diameter. This is a waiver that has been requested quite a bit lately, and it's a little misleading in that it is primarily set up for piping in the streets and more significant systems. In many of the designs that have evolved, there are smaller pipes either within underground basins or connecting roof drains to a storm system. The proposed yard drains in some places with very, very small contributing areas are proposed to be 8 inches in diameter. Everything on the site as it relates to the proposed stormwater management system will be privately owned and maintained. As such, we don't have any issue with that waiver request. Other than that, as they have acknowledged, the rest of the comments in my letter will comply. So as far as the land development portion of this, we have no objection if they were to get a recommendation tonight.
Excellent. Just to confirm, you do, it looks like you're following along with this document, the document that was issued back there. Okay,
do have
I just wanted to be totally sure on that. All right, so any questions from the Planning Commission? None. Any questions from the public? Any comments? If you'd like to come up to the podium and introduce yourself, please.
Andrew Hoffman from Gross McGinley on behalf of Hamilton Crossings. At the outset, I'll indicate that my client does not object to the concept of the development. My client has a concern in terms of the protection of its easements to which this township is a party, the diocese is a party, and the various agreements that the township entered into in connection with Hamilton Crossings that affect this parcel. We have had on again, off again discussions with the developer, which we thought until yesterday were making progress when we received an engineering letter which completely reversed course on any agreement. Therefore, my clients asked me to appear and indicate their objection to anything which impedes their ability to comply with the agreements with the township, to utilize their easements for the stormwater management on this parcel. In particular, I can point out that when they relocated the right-out driveway, they impeded our ability to get to the pond. Now, they have indicated that they would make a modification. I do not know if that has gotten to the plans which you have or not. Other than that, I'm not sure where exactly we stand. And I apologize that we were not able to go through the 6-page engineering letter and the various plans and photographs that we received in time for tonight's meeting. Also, there were prearranged vacations, and I can't reach some of my clients' representatives. But I would ask that in any condition that is placed on this plan, those easement rights have to be protected. I think the township is aware of the need, since it indicates in the letter from the planning department that the township's stormwater access easements have to be protected in this plan, as it indicates on the 2nd page of the letter from the Director of Community Development. And I do believe we need to do more than what was indicated in the township engineer's letter, where the applicant notifies the entities whose easements are going to be affected. I can certainly address any questions you have regarding the easements, but I would ask that there be a condition placed on any recommendation that the easement rights have to be protected. We will certainly do our best to continue to work with the developer, since we would like the development to succeed, but we can't do so at the risk of impeding our own ability to maintain the stormwater management and avoid any kind of violations from either this township or the DEP.
Any comments?
If I may.
Absolutely.
My name is Frank Diamore. I'm an attorney. What Mr. Hoffman is talking about is a private matter that between our development and his. And I think it's adequately met by Mr. McAdams, paragraph 19, subsection D, which Mr. Hoffman was referencing. This easement doesn't get moved unless we come to some sort of agreement. So being raised as an issue, but in my mind, it's not. So I don't know that any condition outside of what's already contained in Mr. McAdams' letter would be appropriate. If we don't reach an agreement, the easement doesn't get moved. That's
Got it. So your feeling is it's a private matter and the two parties will continue to negotiate.
Absolutely. And the township is a party to that agreement, but historically what I've been told is that they've been letting us sort of hash it out together.
If I may, the item in 19 relates to an access easement. And I believe there's much more than access, which is involved here, such as the stormwater pipe that runs from the bypass all the way to the back of the property, which PennDOT transferred to private ownership in connection with the Hamilton Crossings development. So it's more than access. It is stormwater, and stormwater for a 400-acre area of this township.
Any additional comments from our solicitor?
Well, Andrew, I'm not completely familiar with what easement you're saying is violated, but to the extent that you're asking for a condition from the Planning Commission who hasn't reviewed that issue, I'm not sure that they can add a condition at this point relating to the impact on private easement rights with respect to the land development. So there is a condition in every recommendation that the applicant has to comply with outstanding comments in a review letter. So to the extent it's in the engineering review letter, it will be addressed before it gets to a decision from the Board of Commissioners. If it's an additional issue that you think goes beyond that letter, then I assume you'll be at the Board of Commissioners to address it as well. But right now, I'm not sure the Planning Commission is in a position to place a condition that says that the developer is not going to impact your easement rights.
I would disagree, but I will respect what you said.
All right, Mr. Solicitor, we'll proceed then. So hearing no additional comments, we do have additional comments.
Blake Marl, Stevens and Lee on behalf of the Roman Catholic Diocese of Allentown. As I'm sure you know, the Resurrection Cemetery owned by the diocese is just north of this property. And the property itself, as well as the Hamilton Crossings land development, all were once part of the diocese land mass. In the discussions and the agreements among the parties over the years, the diocese wanted to make sure that it was able to fully develop Resurrection Cemetery without issue as issues created by the two subsequent developments. I'm here to indicate to you two things. One is we've asked before, please let us know when these plans come before the township because we want to participate. The second is we don't believe, based upon the plan as we read it right now, that there's an adverse impact upon the cemetery. The cemetery is primarily in Upper Macungie Township, which has, as you know, always creates difficulties when you have to go back and forth between townships over public improvements. Ultimately, the cemetery would like to add an additional mausoleum to what's there, which will require some additional impervious surface. Not much, because as you can see from the prior mausoleum, they're not large. But when that occurs, the stormwater has to go somewhere. And there have been substantial discussions among Hamilton Crossings, the mixed-use development, and the cemetery as to how that stormwater will be accommodated. It has been difficult to bring those discussions to conclusion because the location of the mausoleum is very close to the expanded right-of-way of Crocs Road that Upper Macungie Town, that PennDOT is requiring. We're reasonably confident at this point that the stormwater flows from the mausoleum and the stormwater flows from whatever the expansion of Crocs Road will be when PennDOT finally decides what that is, will go to the same place. And so we're in discussions with the applicant to try to finalize that as soon as they know what's going on with PennDOT. So we're not here objecting, but we're here to tell you that we still have an interest in how the stormwater is handled. This is, to some degree, a different stormwater issue than the one Mr. Hoffman's addressing, which is a regional issue. This is a much smaller issue, much more localized, but unfortunately, more impact from you on an Upper Macungie Township development than there would be in Upper Macungie. So I just wanted to make sure that the Planning Commission and ultimately the board has knowledge that this discussion continues it will not only be a private discussion, but a public discussion, because ultimately, this is a stormwater issue that implicates what happens with Crocs Road and PennDOT. So I'm really just making a comment to bring you up to date rather than to object to action this evening. Does anyone have any questions?
No questions. Thank you. Any additional comments from the public? Mike, if you'd like to come up again and introduce yourself.
Only have one question. Where does the township stand with Centronia Road and Crocs? And being involved with that, with PennDOT, because I'm not saying that this is gonna go away, but that intersection is already a nightmare with 150 more apartments added onto this, with 300 apartments going down there and another traffic signal. I just don't see how anybody's gonna be able to move down there without widening that road to 2 lanes all the way down there. But I wanted to know what the planning commission's thoughts were on that, and what has Upper Macungie been doing to rectify this before these gentlemen approve, get their plan approved. Anybody could update me on that, I'd be appreciative.
Who wants to take that question there? Nate, do you want to take that one, or Mark, or?
I mean, I could do it. Mike, the applicant, as part of this development, is going to have an obligation to address that intersection. There's a requirement from a prior agreement that requires a light to go in there. Upper Macungie is very interested in that happening. So part of the conditions for this development will include addressing that light, whether it be through installation or through a fee. And they'll work directly with Upper Macungie on that issue.
Is there a condition that before the granted occupancy permit that traffic signal be improved? Will that be in the land developers agreement, or is that part of the board or planning commission's conditions?
It was a previous agreement that they are required to adopt, and it does not make the certificate of occupancy contingent upon the light being installed. It just requires them to either install it or pay for the light and work with Upper Macungie to get that done.
Mark, the simple answer, because I think it is a complex question, but the simple answer is, when it's all said and done, there will be a light at that intersection.
Right.
That I think is the easier answer. I've heard the explanation a few times, and I'm just trying to save everyone from the many layers of that complexity. But the end result is that there will be one. And what you're saying is that it is a complex process, is very accurate, but the end result.
It's just between the two sets of apartments that are being built within a quarter mile of each other there, and using Schatz Road as the avenue to make a circular pattern to avoid 222
Yeah.
is just going to be.
I don't think there's any
nightmare.
disagreement. I mean, correct? I mean,
I feel for your residents more than the public, because they got to come in and out of there, and if the traffic's at a standstill at the traffic signals, so they won't be able to get out safely. That's my only concern.
it's a good observation, and thanks for
Thank
bringing it
you.
forward. Any additional questions from the public? From the applicant? On the board? All right, well, we have a pre-prepared motion. Would someone like to make that motion?
I'll make a motion to recommend conditional approval. Lower Macungie mixed-use development located at 617 North Crocs Road with conditions 1 through 9 and waivers 1 through 6.
All right. Is there a second to that motion?
I'll second that motion.
All right. We definitely have it second at this time. Discussion. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say no. Abstaining. Motion passes 4-0. Thank you.
Thank you, appreciate it.
Wes, I got to jump off now, so Rich will be on for the rest of the meeting.
Sounds great. Thanks, Mark.
Thank you. Thank you, guys.
All right, so our next item is 1170 Grange Road, Red Maples Mobile Home Park expansion. Nate, if you'd like to, well, actually, if our applicants could come up, and then Nate, if you want to give us an explanation of this project.
Absolutely, Mr. Chair, Planning Commissioners, while everyone is getting set, this is Red Maple Acres Mobile Home Park conditional use. I should note that we received an application for conditional use and for land develop or subdivision and land development. The subdivision and land development portion of their application is set to be heard at next month's meeting. This evening, we will only be discussing the conditional use aspect of the project. This is a pre-existing mobile home community that's been in place for a great number of years in the community. And the anticipated expansion, which you see on your screen over on the right-hand side, with the horseshoe access road and then the through road bisecting that, has been contemplated for some time and been known to be a potential in the future. It's now become reality with application. This is in the urban zoning district, and in the urban zoning district, mobile home communities are allowed by conditional use, hence the conditional use application. We have 36 new mobile home units that are proposed. And I should also note that the zoning hearing board did hear a request for relief from these applicants regarding this to increase the density of number of units per dwelling units per acre that was allowed. They did prevail and receive zoning relief, which did end in the 36 units you see here today. I should note that the use being allowed by condition has specific standards that are required by the zoning ordinance for a mobile home community, that being meeting the requirements of the saldo, a minimum tract width of 300 feet, and connecting to public water and sewer. In each of these cases, the applicants do meet that standard of the ordinance. I should also note that, as with all conditional uses, we have a number of standard requirements that do come forth in our ordinance that have been discussed over the years with a number of different applicants on different conditional use projects. And not to go into great length, but there are several requirements in the ordinance regarding adequacy of infrastructure, convenience for the community, health, safety, and welfare, as well as connectivity and general infrastructure for multimodal transportation all being met. Those are available in the conditional use section of the zoning ordinance. I should note as well, as I've heard from fellow staff members, planning commissioners, when it does come to planning related items with this site, a generous landscaping plan has been proposed at the rear of the site where the expansion is supposed to occur. They're using smaller species of tree given the confined area. We would recommend ornamental trees as much as possible in that area, flowering ornamental trees, and ones that do not have invasive root systems or would create conflict with driving. You can see on the plan that there is also parking that is proposed to serve each of the units along the horseshoe road and the bisecting road, with stormwater infiltration and treatment areas at the north of the site next to the bypass, and then in between the dwelling units, which I will allow the township engineer to speak to at greater length. Should note that as with all stormwater management in the township, it is required to be naturalized, and we do heavily suggest use of ornamental naturalization plants to ensure that there's a aesthetic value to it and that future residents aren't upset or dismayed by the naturalized stormwater treatment. Additionally, I would note that our general Southwest Comprehensive Plan, the Hamilton Boulevard Corridor Plan, as well as the Township's Greenway Plan, all continue to embrace and speak towards connectivity and sidewalk connectivity. There are sidewalks that are provided in the expansion here. We would continue to urge the applicants to look at connectivity throughout the development as a whole, as well as down along Grange Road towards Hamilton Boulevard. The most recent land development immediately to the south, Byte Simca, does have sidewalk that they would be able to tie into. And this would meet one of our many planning goals and numerous adopted documents that we have here in the township. Also, my understanding when this item came before the zoning hearing board for relief, there was discussion about adequacy for life safety personnel, including addressing for the expansion and addressing of the community as a whole. We would recommend, since this is both a life safety issue and a planning related issue, that the applicants during the conditional use and the land development process look at the addressing for the entirety of the community to make sure that there is a concurrence with the county emergency as well as the fire department, that all of these units can be served and are signed and way found, I guess you could say, in the best way possible, should they need to come in case of an emergency. That also includes making sure that there's continued access for the fire department for their largest apparatus to make sure that it fits throughout the community as well in case they need to serve the site. Last but not least, I would note the applicants are proposing, as both part of their conditional use and the land development that we've received for compliance with zoning, metering, and water and sewer service that will be publicly granted. We would ask and would recommend that, as well as the new section, to make sure that metering through the LCA is handled for water and sewer for older units as well, to make sure that the entirety of the park is in compliance. As we're looking at regional water and regional sewer issues, we want to make sure that those items are addressed. So those are the general planning related documentation that we put down in our review letter. I would just urge again, for both the applicant and for the Planning Commission to consider the importance of the connectivity, the addressing, and the metering. And again, the landscaping is pretty generous for the site for the expansion. With that, on further technical items, I would hand it over to the township engineer. And as always, if you have any questions, I'm happy to answer, or I can interject as we continue on the discussion regarding this conditional use application.
Thanks, Nate. As was mentioned, we are only discussing the conditional use application. As such, it's zoning related. Our letter does go into a bit of detail regarding some items that we feel are covered by the general site layout, public safety kind of things, and that's been the case since we've been here. I will say that a lot of stuff we mention is more of a kind of heads up almost, that these things should be addressed with the land development plan. Full land development plan review will be forthcoming. But just in the interest of layout and just general public safety kind of things, we mention a series of items in the review. They certainly can and should all be addressed when the land development plan is up for discussion. The two notable things that I think are worth mentioning, in addition to the other things that are in the review, is that the way the proposed stormwater management appears to be set up is that there are 3 infiltration basins relying completely on infiltration for discharge. I think in a township that is heavily underlain with limestone, I'm not sure that that's a great idea. I'm also surprised that there are no actual physical pipe systems to convey overflow for heavy rains. I think during the course of the land development review, we certainly will have more detailed comments on the designs themselves. But that was a concern in part because it may affect the layout. But as had been discussed with staff at length, this is really in regard to the use, not the layout, certainly not the design itself. But I just wanted to mention that because it is a concern. It is going to definitely come up. The other thing was that we usually refer to for conditional use reviews is traffic impact on the township road network. And the conditional use application doesn't appear to address that at all. However, it's worth noting that in the land development plan application, there is a request for a waiver of the requirement to provide a traffic impact study. My recollection is that the way the waiver request is noted is that mobile homes generate less traffic than single family. homes, which may or may not be the case as far as the ITE is concerned, that will have to be addressed with some supporting documentation at the appropriate time. But I will mention that the way the ordinance is set up, it just mentions residential dwellings. It doesn't distinguish mobile home, apartment, townhouse, whatever. And the cutoff is 25. They're proposing 36. To me, that's kind of a black and white issue. Not to say that the applicant doesn't have a right to request a waiver, but they're going to have to provide some supporting information for it to be considered. Other than that, I agree with everything that Nate mentioned. As I said, this is a zoning use matter, more so than an engineering review. So I think most of my stuff is extremely general in nature.
Excellent. Any comments, notes from the applicant in response to what you just heard there?
The only comment I would have, and maybe it's not even worth keeping up, but looking at the IT numbers, we looked at the comparison.
Can you just turn the microphone towards you? I know you're right in between them, but just so that everyone can hear online, I know.
We looked at the IT numbers and we did a comparison between the threshold number of 25 units versus the 36 mobile homes, and looked at the peak hour trips for it. And the single family homes in the morning creates 21 trips, where the 36 homes create 25 trips. So technically, we're creating 4 more trips in the morning with 36 units than the single family home. However, in the PM, the 4 to 6 hour, it's the 25 regular single family home creates 27 trips, whereas the 36 mobile homes will only create 21 trips. So in the PM peak, we're actually creating less trips than it. So overall, between the two comparison, it's a reduction in peak hour trips between them based on the ITE.
And that's fine. And I hope that that gets submitted in support of the waiver request. But just a clarification, the traffic impact study requirement is based on 25 or more dwelling units, not peak PM, not peak AM. It is very specific, and thankfully for me, it's very clear. 25 or more units, dwelling units. The peak PM trips are directly related to how the traffic impact fee is assessed, which is a whole nother animal. But as it relates to the traffic impact study requirement, you have to do a study when you're over 25 or more dwelling units. I'm not disputing what you were talking about with the ITE, with the peak PM, peak AM. No issue with that, and certainly it will need to be sent in to support any other waiver requests. I'm just trying to clarify the way the ordinance is written. It just talks about dwelling units. And again, this is something that I think probably more appropriately would be addressed at the next stage. It's just that historically, since I've been the township engineer, we've been asked to weigh in on traffic. And, you know, as the Planning Commission knows, there have been much more substantive projects that have been proposed where traffic impact is a much, much bigger concern. We don't have gigantic concerns here, but there are thresholds, and we're just mentioning that this is how it's written.
Right,
Okay.
right. And I mean, we access onto Grange Road, which as you head northwest, you're going to go to Mill Creek Road, where you've got a signal already, and otherwise you're going to the south and you're going to come out to Grange and Hamilton.
But and that's true,
Right.
but dependent on information that's submitted as part of the land development and any other waivers, we will study that, because the traffic impact study may suggest that there might need to be timing changes to those signals. Certainly not suggesting that 36 mobile homes is going to meet warrants for another traffic signal by any means. I'm not suggesting that in any way. It's just there's nuances, and these are design related things that may come up with the next step.
Great. Any additional comments?
Mr. Jameson, I do have renderings that you sent with the packet, if you'd like to put those up for anybody at home as well.
Sure, certainly may, if you'd like to do that, yeah. I think we need, one of the comments was putting our rendering design package in your format, which we're happy to do. But Chris requested I send some images over of likely home styles. So this is what we sent over. Of the 36 proposed, it's mostly single unit homes versus what is commonly called a double wide,
Mhm.
called a multi-section home. It's mostly single section homes with a few, maybe 6 multi-section homes. Worth noting at the zoning hearing board that the 36, where it's mostly single section, is less impervious than were they all multi-section homes, which we would have been allowed to do by right. So that was one of the cases there. Also, just, I don't know if it was on our application, Mr. McAdam, but we do have an existing NPDS permit for the property. Just, you may know that, but just in case you didn't. So we're fortunate in the sense that NPDS exists for the existing stormwater management design. Happy to go through the land development process. But I think in terms of being able to deliver more affordable housing quickly, that tends to be a long lead time item. Getting the NPDS permit in place, because this plan was previously approved and ready for recording, but just never recorded. That was in place, even though the plan has since expired.
Well, just as a clarification, I certainly, I don't want to, we usually don't get into technical things, right, at meetings, public meetings. And in fairness to you and the submission, I don't recall if for the land development portion of the applications, if the previous NPDES permit was submitted, we're going to need it to see it and to see what had been approved as part of that NPDES permit. I certainly can't say that we're going to require you to change what was previously approved, but I'm certainly going to need to know that the Conservation District is on board with what's proposed. Because like I mentioned a few minutes ago, what I see on the land development plan, which is still under review, just caught me off guard a little bit. And my bigger concern is not so much whether it's something that can work, it's can it work and be okay relative to the immediate and other residents in the township as it relates to some of these ridiculously big storms that we're getting, we are getting with much more frequency. That's where some of the concerns stem. So I think that any previously approved stuff, please make sure that that's submitted if it hadn't been already, and we can talk about it at the appropriate time. So,
Thank you.
All right. Any comments from the Planning Commission? It's been noted a few times here that this is just a conditional use portion, but it's equally been echoed some of the concerns that are there. And I think generally from the last time, those are the same ones that came up in this meeting. So as we move forward to the next phase of things, those are things that should be looked at. Again, sidewalks, walkways, turning radiuses, all that stuff is going to be important, including the stormwater. But we do have a pre-prepared conditional approval. You have reviewed that. I think I saw you grab a copy of that, correct?
36.
Great.
Okay, yeah. We have read them and we are fine.
Great. All right. Is there a motion to move forward?
I'd like to make a motion to recommend conditional approval of Red Maples MHC LLC's conditional use application with conditions 1 through 7.
Great. Is there a second?
Second.
All right. Discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, say no. We have a motion that carries.
okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, the last item on the agenda is the act 537 plan comments and recommendation. If you remember at our last meeting, we had a lengthy review of some of the, about the 537 plan from the LCA members. And they asked for comment, recommendation. Nate, do you want to tell us where we need to go with this?
Certainly. I mean, Mr. Chairman, you basically covered it. This has been a project. The Act 537 plan is a regional plan each municipality is part of. Staff has been spending a very large amount of time on this over the last several years. The presentation that was made to you last month was to get any feedback that you may have. I should note that staff ensured to the best of our ability, making sure that future build out of the township of developable parcels, as well as those that we have preserved as part of our aggressive land preservation strategy, were all included as part of the Act 537. With the presentation you received, you were asked to give any feedback you might have. You can provide points which we can make a note of and put into a letter, which will be delivered, which is required as part of the process, this very long process. It's just one step in that process. Or you could just simply say no comment and thanks for the information. It's entirely up to you. But we would need to render some form of documentation as we proceed forward with the plan's approval on behalf of the township. And you are the planning body that would be providing that feedback. So anything that you have to say, we'll take and put into a format for you. And it's entirely up to the four of you to provide the feedback at this point in time. All I know is we need to get it in a relatively short time frame, hence why it's on the agenda this month.
Great. At that meeting, as I asked, you did have a number of comments, some really great ones. Anything that you felt should be added into these?
So I made a number of comments that weren't included in the minutes about this in the last meeting. So essentially, the comments were really just to provide some type of tracking from a project management perspective that can be understandable for the community members. The document that was reviewed during that meeting was a great comprehensive project plan, but it was, the audience for that was really for people who are project management certified and engineers. And so it would be useful to have some type of visual that is able for people to easily understand, given all of the different municipalities that are involved, different project completion dates, to easily see what's being done. There's a considerable cost associated with this plan. There is a very minimal projected uptick year to year. So given that, it's going to be important to make sure that the scope is managed to make sure that there isn't a scope creep that results in a higher than anticipated forecasted cost. So it just seemed to be a really, big plan with a very minimal, clear timeline, clear understanding of what's going to happen. And so it would be great if we could have more of a kind of tracking monthly update of what's happening with the plan.
Great. So basically what I'm hearing is everything that was proposed there, no concerns there, just you'd like to have periodic feedback.
Parts of the plan seem unrealistic to think that we're not going to have a higher uptick year to year, given the fact that costs are more over time. So to expect the cost to remain the same is already questionable, right?
Yeah.
So there's certain aspects of the plan that just need to be a little bit more thoughtful to know that there's going to be an anticipated probably delay with, you think of the supply chain delays with the construction. But so more adequately or more realistically portray the realistic efforts so that the citizens of the various communities can have a more realistic understanding of what's being done. And there's a lot of great things that are being done, but to portray that in a way. And I think it's also interesting how Lower Macungie was green in the plan and other areas are red. So it would be great to know that their progress is being focused and being made in the red and moving those to yellow so that we kind of can see the left to right movement of this
Yeah.
all coming together. And so that's
I mean, this project,
simple to think about.
yeah, for sure, this project will go into the historic projects. I mean, this is a massive project for Lehigh County, but obviously it affects Lower Country directly. All right, those are definitely helpful comments. Any other members of the Planning Commission have comments?
I would just add, I think we'll take those comments, those eyes, and we'll craft them and send something
Great.
to the planning commission just to see before we add that to the 537 comment, just to make sure we got the right comments.
I think
You know,
the comments from the community, people are seeing prices go up with the school district, prices go up. So I think it's fair to provide a realistic projection of costs,
Mhm.
right? And not to have it be smoke and mirrors. So speaking on behalf of other people who aren't present and being a citizen planner, I'm just kind of thinking about having this be a realistic from completion, but also why not be more realistic about expected costs?
right. Yeah, understood.
I would add, and we have Joe Nolan that did the presentation at the last meeting. He's retired, but he's still working as a consultant. And thank God for me, he still handles all the sanitary sewer planning, certainly. And my understanding of the whole process, as it were, I can tell you that Lower Macungie has made dramatic progress in chipping away at a lot of the issues that DEP has said, you got to fix these things. And, the color coordination on the map is actually really helpful because, to your point, most of Lower Macungie is green. And that, to me, is an automatic notation, like Lower Macungie is getting things done. I hope you can appreciate, we have no control over what happens in the other municipalities. We can't say to them, hey, please up your budget and take care of this. And I can tell you that with all of the projections that Joe has looked at over the years that we've been your engineer, he's used all of his extensive background to try to help guide the township staff in how we put these things together, and accordingly have a hand in what we choose to do in terms of the yearly sanitary sewer projects. Many of the sewer mains have been either replaced or relined to fix some of the I&I issues that have been had over the years that contributed to many of the plant overflows, that kind of thing. And we're actually, I believe, winding down on how much of that we need to do. And we'll be shifting in general from that to trying to fix any lateral connection issues that exist, which are a little more difficult and unfortunately just as costly. But we're working toward having the township abide by what DEP says they need to do. But we have no control of what everybody else has going on. And I think that, while I know that there are monthly meetings with the watershed group, I can't help but think that Bruce, kind of, the manager on behalf of Lower Macungie, is probably like, hey, guys, you might want to pick it up a little bit. But I'm assuming the costs you're referring to are the township resident costs. And I think that things are managed pretty well. I know there have been some increases, but from what I've seen, the township has done a hell of a job in getting a lot of these issues addressed. So I hear your concerns, and like Vince said, we'll get our heads together and see about what we can do about more frequent updates. I can tell you that even with my limited knowledge of the 537 planning, detailed stuff, updates don't usually happen all that frequent. It's just not the way that stuff works, not because people want to hide things. It's just the planning is set. You're supposed to do X, Y, and Z. My recollection is DEP gives you a certain amount of time to do those things. In addition to however much planning goes into, anticipated development, things like that. It's kind of a long, drawn out process. And in my 40 years of doing this stuff, and I'm not saying we can't do what you're saying. I'm just saying that it's typical for the 537 planning stuff that there's not always very frequent updates. We can see what we can do in terms of either providing something a little more I'll say user-friendly in terms of what's been done and what will be done and all. But in terms of more frequent updates, I'm not sure that that's something that typically happens, and we'll see what we can do.
And is the budget a weighted average? I was, if the budgets, it seems like all of the municipalities are sharing in the cost.
I don't want to misspeak because I'm not entirely sure how the costs are all whacked up. I believe it kind of boils down to your flows, I think. Lower Macungie will have a certain amount of flow contributing to the system. Upper will have its share of flows, and the other municipalities that impact and flow into the system. It was determined at some point how that was going to happen in terms of the costs. And my suspicion is it was probably done based on their flows. And then as projected flows change, I would expect that that would change as well. But since I've been with the township, it's been more focused on what the township needs to do their stuff. And in fairness, Bruce and Joe Nolan may talk to each other about how those other like watershed contributing groups, how all those costs are factored in. I can't say that I'm immediately privy to that just because I haven't needed to be more directly involved. We can see what we can find out.
Because that would be more important than monthly updates, right?
Right.
If it's not a weighted average, the question is, are our costs lower because we're green? And are the costs higher in the areas that are red, or is it a shared cost? If it's a shared cost, then we want to hold those red areas accountable to ensure that the costs don't increase.
Right.
Because there's limited.
Because of them not doing stuff. I
And
completely
so
understand what you mean.
that is not clear.
Right.
That issue to me should be documented.
Right.
So that we have clarification on is how that's being done.
Right.
'Cause
Understood.
that to me was.
And I guess my first thought is I was thinking costs more of how much is the township spending on repairs?
Mhm.
Those costs as opposed to fees, sewer tapping fees and things like that. That might be more of a weighted thing.
Yeah.
I'm not certain, but seeing what you're listening and hearing what you're saying and clarifying, it's more about not just the construction costs, but the other entry fee, so to speak,
And
that everybody's paying. right?
Ozias,
Yeah.
it's actually probably worth it to reach out because it's, I mean, just over the years, this project has been going on for so long, kind of the build up to it, the actual assessment of it and all the things that go into it. It's actually worth maybe spend some time, reach out to Bruce.
If, no, we all should have this understanding. So the question was, do we have comment?
Yeah. Oh, no.
My comments.
Right. Yeah. No, I'm on
And
board with you. I
It should be documented and let them come back with the feedback. Because none of us can answer these questions clearly,
correct.
right? So we all should have these answers. I'm not leaving here with the homework assignment. is what I'm
Right.
saying. We all collectively should understand these
Well,
answers.
I guess what I was,
I'm not taking
yeah.
this as a Ozias follow-up.
Yeah. I
I
get,
understand what you're saying, but.
no. I guess what
I have,
there's,
you need clarification.
I'm not opposed to that. I guess what I was saying is there's so many layers in this. Like you were talking about understanding the flows. I mean, that's determined by an agreement that, I mean, might be from like 1970. I mean, there's some old agreements. There's an updated agreement. There's a ton of history in this entire thing. It wasn't necessarily for homework. It seemed like you were just naturally being inquisitive, but to get,
Answering
yeah.
the comment on the agenda. The comment on the agenda, do any of us have comments regarding this item?
yeah.
So I'm reiterating my comments.
Yeah, no, it's
And
perfect.
so I'm saying, these are my comments.
Perfect. Oh, no, I mean, that's why I turned it to you because I knew you had
It
done.
wasn't hear comments and take your comments back, come back and do homework. No, hear my comments based upon the agenda. And if you want to do something with them, you can. If you want to ignore them, you can as well. But the question was, do we have any comments about the plan? You redirected my comments. You said, I shared some comments that were good last time.
Yeah.
I was quiet until you directed me to say something. Then I comment. So that's all I'm saying. These are my comments. Take them for what you want or ignore them.
Perfect. I don't think they're going to get ignored. We're good. I just wanted to, so that there's more to this. I'll after the meeting, I'll explain. I don't think there are any other comments from anyone else. All right. How do you want us to, Nate, how do you want us to move this forward, or solicitor? What is the preference? How do you want us to move that forward?
I think we can, not to jump in front of you, Nate, but I think what we can do is, like I said, we'll formulate from the minutes,
Okay.
from the recording, we'll formulate comment from Ozias. We can get with the solicitor as well, just to make sure we're hitting the right points and get it back. I think the best would be to get it back, send it back to you guys, the planning commission, take a look at it, make sure we're getting the right, your right comments, Ozias, and we'll incorporate that into the letter, the comment letter back to DEP and to LCA.
Perfect. So no action today. Work on this at the next meeting or after, once we.
I think the action would be to send a letter with the comments, based upon the comments for tonight's meeting. And we would just incorporate the comments from what Ozias said.
Perfect.
But I think we do have to take action on it tonight,
So what
with
you
comments
would-
or without comments.
What you would want to do is just take a vote or consensus from the board that those are the comments you want included. As you're speaking as a board, it's not individual comments from individual members. So if the board wants that to go out in that form, they can approve that tonight and the staff can make that happen.
Got it. All right. Does someone want to take on that motion?
I withdraw my comments. Just, we track them. They're not necessary. It's making a bigger to do out of any, yeah. And based upon what Chris is saying, it's only me talking. So it doesn't need to have this level of. I withdraw my
Okay.
comments.
Okay. So I don't think that then I don't think that there are any other.
If everyone's fine? It's fine. I'm totally okay. with
Okay.
withdrawing my comments.
Okay.
I'd like to make a motion to respond to the Act 537 plan comments, saying that we have no comments.
I second.
All right. Discussion? All in favor? Say aye.
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 4 ayes. Excellent. Cool. All right. Is there or are there any other items, any updates on projects, past projects that have moved forward, gone through the Board of Commissioners? Nate, I guess I'm passing that to you if there's anything that you wanted to.
Sure, yeah, I can speak to that. The Schenkel subdivision, we do expect that, which is up on Mountain Road there. We do expect, Mountain Road and Shannick, I should note, that land as set to be subdivided and preserved in perpetuity, as well as two buildable estate lots as part of the family, land planning there. We do expect that to go before the board. We are expecting Hamilton Square to appear before the board and circle back in the relatively near future. And then I should just note, as a kind of a coming attractions, we did have a number of other applications that will be reviewed next month in July. And that would be in addition to potentially resubmissions or everything that potentially comes in. So July, we could have a decent agenda in front of us as well, like we did this evening with 4, maybe 5 items. So just be aware.
Excellent. All right. Motion to adjourn.
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
I'll second it.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. We have 4 O's. We are adjourned at 7:26.
Thanks, Nate. Thanks, Rich.
Good night,
Thank you.
everyone.
Thanks, everybody. Have a good night.
Have a good night.